This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we have seen how to work with find by methods in Spring Data JPA. Right. What is that find by method? In the Spring Data JPA, we have a flexibility to derive the query based on the method name. So generally, in the persistence layer, programmers has to write the queries to do persistent operations. But when ORM frameworks comes into picture, they provided several predefined methods for us to perform the card operations with the table. Right. Now, in those ORM frameworks, we should write the logic to perform the card operations by using those predefined methods. When it comes to the Spring Data JPA, this Data JPA also provided the predefined methods, right? But here we no need to write any implementation. Just we need to use those predefined methods to execute the queries. And second approach of executing the query in the Data JPA is by writing find by methods. If you write a find by method with a proper method naming convention, then Data JPA can derive the query based on your method and it is going to execute that query in the runtime. That is one approach that we discussed in the last session. So today we are going to talk about how to work with custom queries in the Data JPA. How to work with custom queries in the Data JPA. That means I will write the query, JPA has to execute that query. I will write the query, JPA has to execute that query. That means programmer will write the query, programmer will give query as the input for the Data JPA, then Data JPA has to execute the query. In the previous approach, we are just writing the method. Based on the method, they are deriving the query and they are executing. When you go for predefined method also, they are only executing the query based on the method we are calling. But today's approach is different completely. Programmer will tell which query Data JPA has to execute in the runtime. So that is called working with custom queries in the Data JPA. So custom queries. So to work with custom queries, in JPA, Data JPA. In the Data JPA, programmer will write and give query to Data JPA. To work with custom queries in Data JPA, programmer will write and give query to the Data JPA, then it will execute our query. Right. So to work with custom queries, we will use query annotation. We are going to use one annotation called query annotation. Now syntax. If I want to work with one custom query, how we need to do that? First of all, we will create a repository to work with the Data JPA. Can you tell me how can I create a repository using Data JPA? Can anybody tell me how can I create a repository using Data JPA? Come on fast. How to create a repository using Data JPA? Guys, can you hear me? Why are you not responding? Am I audible or not? Right. There are two repository interfaces are available to create our repository. Right. Now, as of now, we have seen CRUD repository. So I'm going for public interface our repository, which is contacts master repo extends from CRUD repository. For this, we'll set two parameters. Right. First parameter is type of the entity. Second parameter is type of the primary key. Fine. With this, we are able to create our user-defined repository interface. Now, so generally we no need to write the methods because predefined methods are already available. Suppose if you have a requirement to retrieve the data based on the non-primary key column, then we can go for find by methods. I don't want to do that. Now I want to perform one custom query operation. I want to retrieve all the names of the contacts. I want to retrieve all the names of the contacts, right? This is called as projection. This is called as projection. Now we will see what is projection, what is selection. Also we'll explain that part. First, how to work with a custom query. Here we will write public return type of that method, whatever we are going to take, return type. Here we are going to specify method name. Here we are going to specify method params. Method params, the syntax for working with the custom query. Method params we are going to write. Which query it has to execute, for that we are going to write a annotation called @query annotation. We need to specify our query here. We need to specify our query here. This is the syntax that we need to follow in order to write custom query in data JPA repository. We need to write a custom query to write that to work with custom query in the data JPA repository. This is the syntax that we need to follow. All of you look at this interface. Public interface, contacts master repository interface extending from CRUD repository. Inside that, I am writing one method. For that method, I am writing, my method name can be anything now. My method name can be anything because it is not a find by method. My method name can be anything. Public return type method name, public return type method name, method parameters. For that method, I specified @query annotation. @query annotation. What is the purpose of @query? Which query it has to execute, we need to pass that query. Which query we need to execute, we have to pass that query. So here we are going to use, generally we will use HQL queries. So when we are working with ORM frameworks like Hibernate, we will use HQL queries. Here it supports for both HQL as well as SQL also. So when we are working with custom queries, recommended to use HQL queries. Recommended to use HQL queries. Why we need to use the HQL queries? HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. Hibernate Query Language. HQL queries are database independent. HQL queries are DB independent. They can work with any database. Whereas SQL is database dependent. HQL queries are database independent. In ORM frameworks, dialect classes will be used. Dialect classes will be used to convert HQL queries to SQL queries. To convert HQL queries to SQL queries. We are going to write a HQL query. Our database don't know what is HQL. Database knows only SQL queries. Database knows only SQL, but programmer is writing HQL. There is a mismatch. That a HQL query should be converted to SQL query. Who is going to do that conversion? ORM frameworks will use dialect classes. What is a dialect class? Dialect class is used to convert HQL query to underlying database SQL query. So this is very important interview question. What is a HQL? What is HQL? HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. Next one, what is dialect? What is dialect? Right? Dialect class is used to convert. Dialect class is used to convert HQL queries to SQL queries. Dialect class is used to convert HQL queries to SQL queries. So what is the advantage of writing right? So what is HQL query? HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. Can database understand the HQL or database cannot understand the HQL? Come on, let's please respond. Database can understand the HQL or database cannot understand the HQL? Database cannot understand the HQL. Then what database can understand? What our database can understand? Database will understand only SQL query. Now we are writing HQL because of database independency. Our query should be database independent. My query should be able to execute in the Oracle database. My query should be able to execute in the MySQL database also. Whatever the query I am writing, today I may connect to the Oracle database, tomorrow I may connect to the MySQL database. Without changing the query, I should be able to communicate with the two databases. Then instead of writing the SQL queries, we need to write the HQL query. But the problem, database cannot understand the HQL. Somebody should convert our HQL query to SQL query. That person is called dialect. That person is called dialect. Dialect classes are going to convert HQL queries to SQL query. Our ORM frameworks will support for more than 30 dialect classes. For every database, for sir, who is on the camera, ping that person name to me. I will remove that person from the meeting. No problem. Ping that person name personally to me. I will dismiss that person. Every day I am saying, please stop your cameras, but they are not taking it seriously. If anybody camera is on, please ping that person name personally to me. I will remove that person from the meeting. Then he will stop it for next time. Whenever you join the call, can't you check whether your webcam is on or not? It doesn't take more than 10 seconds. Right. Now, what is HQL? HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. Why we are going for HQL instead of the SQL? SQL queries are database dependent. The database SQL query which is working in the Oracle may not work in the MySQL because database to database SQL language is going to be different. Some functionalities of the SQL queries will be different. Like functions, predefined functions will be available. They may not work in all the databases. Right. That is the reason our ORM framework came up with a concept called database independent queries. Those database independent queries are called as HQL queries. When I write the HQL query, database cannot understand that. So we need to convert that HQL query to SQL query. For that, for every database, we are having a dialect class. For every database, we are having a dialect class. So how many dialect classes are available? How many dialect classes are available? There are more than 30 dialect classes supporting by our Hibernate. Based on the database configuration, it will understand which dialect class it has to use. If you do Oracle database configuration, then it will use Oracle class to convert HQL query to Oracle DB space SQL. Are you able to follow me? What is dialect? Can you tell me what is the purpose of dialect? I want response in the chat box. What is the purpose of dialect? HQL to SQL conversion. Perfect. Right. Now, how to write the custom HQL queries in the data JPA? To write the custom queries in the data JPA, we are using a annotation called @query annotation. Sir, do I need to implement the logic for the method, or I will write it as an abstract method, or I need to write it as an abstract method? In the data JPA, you don't need to write any implementation. You just write your abstract method and you specify which query it has to execute. Implementation will be provided to your method in the runtime. Implementation will be provided to your method in the runtime. So see the beauty of the data JPA. What query it has to execute, we are telling. But how to execute that query, we are not telling. That is going to be taken care by data JPA. When you go for Hibernate, you have to write the query, you have to get a session factory, you have to get the transaction, you have to execute that query. But here we are just writing one abstract method. We are just writing one abstract method and we are telling which query it has to execute. Then internally that will convert that HQL query to SQL query. Right. Now let us see some sample examples. What is the difference between HQL queries and SQL query. Right. Let me check 1 second why the voice is having echo. Yes. Guys, is it audible now? Please confirm. Give me 1 second, coming out from the room. Is it clear for everyone? Still are you facing any echo? No, fine. Right. Yeah. Now let us take a small examples how we need to write HQL queries and what is the SQL query and how the HQL query looks like. Generally, SQL queries are DB dependent, whereas HQL queries are DB independent. HQL queries are DB independent. Right. Now, SQL queries will use table names and column names in the query. SQL queries will use table name and column names in the query. Right. Whereas HQL queries will use entity class name and entity class property names in query. Right. So when we are writing a SQL query, we will use a table name and we will use column name. But when we are writing the HQL queries, we will use entity class name and entity class variable name. Right. Now let us see small examples how we are going to write the query. Now I want to retrieve all records from table. I want to retrieve all the records from the table. Can you tell me SQL query for this? Can you tell me SQL query for this? Right. How to retrieve all the records from the table by using SQL? Select star from table. Right. SQL query looks like this. Select star from our table name is contacts master. What table name is contacts master. Now, if I want to write the same query by using HQL, I will write like this. From contacts master. That's it. From contacts master. From contacts master represents select star from contacts master. So if you are retrieving all the columns from the table, then your query will start with the from keyword. From entity class name. From contacts master entity. This is my entity class name. So in the last class, whatever the entity class we used, based on that entity, I am writing my HQL queries. Please remember that. So select star from contacts master is my table name. So if you look into our IDE, we have entity class for that. We have a entity class for that. Table name is the contacts master. Entity class which is mapped is contacts master. Yes, we are able to retrieve it. Now, next requirement. retrieve record based on the contact ID. Retrieve the record based on the contact ID. Can you tell me SQL query for that? Retrieve record based on contact ID. Now tell me SQL query and I will write the HQL for that. So what is the SQL? We need to write it. Select star from table name, which is contacts master, where contact underscore ID is equal to some positional parameter. Where contact ID is equal to positional parameter. Similarly, how to write HQL query for this? How can I write a HQL query for this? To write a HQL query for this, I will write from entity class name. What is that? Contacts master entity, where instead of the column name I need to use the variable name, where contact ID is equal to either positional parameter or I can give named position parameter also. From contacts master entity, where contact ID is equal to given positional parameter. All of you clear with this one? How to write a SQL and further corresponding HQL. Now, when we are working with the ORM, if you write a HQL query like this, that HQL will be converted to this SQL. Who will do that conversion? When I'm writing a HQL, that is converting to SQL. Who is converting that HQL to SQL? Dialect class is going to convert it. Here I can give either a positional parameter or I can give a named positional parameter also. I will talk about what is named positional parameter. Named positional parameters will improve readability of the query. Named positional parameter will improve readability of the query. Right. Now next requirement. Retrieve the record based on contact name and contact number. Retrieve the record based on contact name and contact number. Can you tell me the SQL so that I will write the HQL? Retrieve record based on contact name and contact number. Yes, sir. I will explain positional parameters. Don't worry about it. Now, tell me SQL query for this. Tell me SQL query for this. Select a star from table where name is equal to positional parameter and contact number is equal to name is equal to this value and number is equal to that particular value. Right. SQL query looks like this. Select star from table name where contact underscore name is equal to positional parameter and contact underscore number is equal to positional parameter. That is the SQL query for that. Now can you tell me how to write a HQL for this? How to write a HQL for this? Can anybody write the HQL for this? Or you want me to write it? Can you write the HQL query for this? From contacts master, very good. From contacts master entity where contact name is equal to named positional parameter name and contact number is equal to number. Right. Anything you can give as a name for any name you can use for positional parameter. These are called as named positional parameters. These are called as named positional parameters. Right. Select a star from contacts master where contact name is equal to positional parameter and contact number is equal to positional parameter. For that, corresponding HQL query is this. From contacts master entity where contact name is equal to that named positional parameter and contact number is equal to named positional parameter. Right? Fine. Perfect. Now, so this first query will retrieve all the records from the table. First query will retrieve all the records from the table. Second query is selecting particular record. Second query is selecting particular record. Third query also selecting particular record. That is called as selection. If you are retrieving specific rows from the table, then that is called as selection operation. So what is selection in the database? What is the selection in the database? What is selection in the database? The process of retrieving specific rows from the table is called as selection. The process of retrieving specific rows from table is called as selection. The process of retrieving specific rows from the table is called as selection. How to achieve how to achieve selection in the SQL? To work with selection, we will use where clause in the SQL. We will use where clause in the SQL query. Right. So when you are working with SQL operations, you need to understand what is the selection and what is projection. So now we understood what is the selection. Guys, come and tell me what is selection? Selection. Come on, fast. You should be quick in the responses. What is selection? Retrieving specific record, or retrieving more than one record, retrieving one record, or retrieving more than one record based on the where clause. That means selecting particular rows from the table is called as selection. Getting specific rows from the table is called selection. Now, what is projection? Now we need to understand what is the projection in the database. What is projection in DB? What is projection in DB? Projection nothing but the process of retrieving specific columns from the records. What is projection? The process of retrieving specific columns data from record or from records. The process of retrieving specific columns data from the record or records for one record or for more than one record. If you retrieve specific column data, then that is called as projection. Specific columns retrieving, if you want to retrieve specific columns data from the record, then that is called as projection. Right. How can we achieve projection in the database? By specifying column names in the SQL, by specifying column names in the SQL query, we can achieve projection. By specifying column names in the SQL query, we can achieve projection. Right. So what is the selection? What is projection? Selection means retrieving specific rows from the table. Projection means retrieving specific columns from the table. So generally when we are writing the queries, we write select star. Select star is not the best practice. If you write star in the SQL query, it will take more time to execute that query. It will kill performance of your application. Always you need to specify which column data you want to retrieve in the SQL query. Now I want to retrieve contact name based on contact ID. I want to retrieve only person contact name based on contact ID. Can I write a query like this? Select star from contacts master where contact ID is equal to question mark. Is it the right way of retrieving the data or is it not right way of retrieving the data? I want only person contact name. I want to retrieve only person contact name. But what I am doing here, I am setting star. If I set star, what will happen? It will retrieve all columns data for that record. But what I need, only person contact name. So how we will modify this? Select contact underscore ID from contacts master where contact ID is equal to given value. This is the right way of retrieving the retrieving contact name, not ID. Select contact name from contacts master where contact ID is equal to given ID. So now retrieving only contact name. Retrieve contact name based on contact ID. Retrieve contact name from contacts master table based on contact ID. In this query, projection is available as well as selection is also available. In this query, projection is available as well as selection is also available. How can you say projection is available? How can you say projection is available in this query? I am retrieving only specific column data. I'm retrieving only specific column data. That's why we can say projection is there. And I'm retrieving specific contact record. Then I can say selection is available. So whenever we are writing SQL query, we need to perform selection operations. We need to perform projection operations. Sometimes we will perform both in a single query only. So now the latest query that we have written, it is using both selection concept as well as projection concept also. All of you clear with this one? All of you clear with this one? Right. Any questions, anybody? Apart from that named position parameter that I will explain. You understood, right? What is selection, what is projection, and how to write the HQL query for the given SQL also you understood. Now, let us write few SQL queries with the selection, then see what are the corresponding HQL queries for that. We are going in the reverse engineering. First I am writing the SQL, for that I am writing the HQL. But what the ORM framework will do, they will take the HQL and they will convert to SQL. How the HQL will be converted to SQL? How HQL query will be converted to SQL? That is by using find by methods. Right. Right. Whenever we are writing the find by methods also, find contact name by contact ID. Right. Now, let us see here. For this is retrieving contact name using contact ID. This is SQL. Can anybody guess HQL for this before I am going to write it? Can anybody guess HQL query? Can you send me HQL query for this? Guys, please try. Write the HQL query for this. Abhinesh, you have to write it. Don't say same mostly. I want you to write it. I want to see how you are writing. Type it. You have keyboard, right? Type. Smruti, you are using column names. Right. Whenever we apply projection in the query, then our HQL query also will start with the select keyword, not from the from keyword. Whenever HQL will start with the from keyword, whenever HQL start with the from keyword, if you are retrieving all the columns data, then your query will start with the from keyword. If you are retrieving specific columns data, then it is going to start with the select keyword. It is going to start with the select keyword. Right. Now, so select which column data I want to retrieve, contact name. For that there is a property that I am going to take. Select contact name from contacts master entity where contact ID, which is a property, where contact ID is equal to colon of CID. This is the corresponding HQL query for this. Select contact name from contacts master entity where contact ID is equal to named positional parameter. Now, let me take one more requirement. Retrieve contact name and contact number. Retrieve contact name and contact number for all records. Retrieve contact name and contact number for all records. Can you tell me SQL and HQL? Can you tell me SQL query and HQL query for this requirement? Can you write it? contact name and contact number I need to retrieve for all the records. So what is the SQL query I need to write for that, and what is the HQL query I need to write for that? Right. So here I am retrieving all the records. For all the records I want to retrieve this data. Right. Select contact underscore name, comma, contact underscore number from contacts master table. From contacts master, no need of applying any where class, because I want to retrieve this columns data for all the records. What is the corresponding HQL for this? What is the corresponding HQL for this? Select. Instead of the column name, I will use variable name of the entity, comma. Instead of the column name, I will use property name of the entity class. From. Instead of the table name, I will use entity class name, which is contacts master entity. This is the corresponding HQL for that. So we are able to understand what is the difference between SQL query and HQL query. So SQL queries will use table names and column names in the query, whereas HQL queries will use entity class name and entity class property names in the query. So with this, I hope you understood what is the difference between HQL and SQL. And if anybody gives you HQL, you should be able to write the SQL. And if anybody gives you SQL, you should be able to write the HQL also. The only difference, SQL queries are DB dependent, HQL queries are DB independent. But remember one point, our database cannot understand the HQL. In the Hibernate, we are having dialect class. Those classes are going to convert HQL queries to SQL queries. Right. Now, which one is recommended in the project? Either SQL query is recommended or HQL query is recommended. Come on, guys. HQL query is recommended, SQL query is recommended. Yes, we cannot say this. You people are wrong. You people are wrong. You cannot say always HQL is better. You cannot say always HQL is better. The reason is HQL queries will kill performance, because that HQL query should be translated to SQL before execution. But if I write the SQL, directly it will execute with the database. So performance wise, SQL queries are better. Maintenance wise, HQL queries are better. You have to give the diplomatic answer. When somebody asks you HQL is better or SQL is better, don't say SQL is better, because that person may give importance to the performance of the system. My application performance should be very speed. If the application performance should be very speed, then you should not use the HQL queries. First of all, you should not use the ORM framework. If you want to improve performance of the application, plain JDBC is better. Plain SQL queries are better. If you want to think about maintenance of the project, today I am using Oracle, maybe in future I may change the database, maybe I may go for different database, then HQL queries are better. If you are thinking about performance of the system, then SQL queries are better. Why SQL queries are faster than HQL? Can you answer now? Why SQL queries will give better performance than the HQL? Come on, guys. Why SQL queries will give better performance than HQL? Conversion is not required. When we are going for SQL query, no need to convert it. Directly the queries will execute with the database. But when it comes to the HQL query should be translated to SQL using dialect class. For translating, it will take some time. At least 1 millisecond it is going to increase, right? At least 1 millisecond it is going to increase, or at least 2 milliseconds it is going to take. The 2 milliseconds also very, very important in the production. The 2 milliseconds also very, very important in the production. They are database independent, but still that query should be converted to SQL. So with the HQL, advantages are available as well as the disadvantages also available. With the SQL also, advantages are available, disadvantages are available. So when to choose what? It depends on your business scenario. It depends on your business scenario. I will tell you one scenario where we have used this SQL instead of the HQL. Actually, I told you that I am working for a banking application in current company. My current company is a product-based bank, that is USA Bank. As part of that application, we are developing several microservices. We are developing several microservices as part of my application. The objective of my application is, it is credit card decisioning system. Actually, I am part of credit card decisioning system. So sometimes whenever I'm explaining the class, I use it to specify CSL nothing but credit service layer. I'm part of this credit service layer. This system is used to decide eligibility of the credit card applicant. Now, as part of this system, we are having several microservices. As part of this system, we are going to use several microservices. Right. These microservices are also going to communicate with the database. These microservices are going to communicate with the database. Communicate with the database. Right. Here, for my system, request comes from the vendors. Request comes from the vendors. Now, whenever request comes from the vendors, all microservices should execute to process that request, and my system should decide whether that application is eligible for the credit card from my bank or not. Suppose you want to apply for a credit card in my bank. Suppose if you go for Axis Bank, you will apply for a credit card in the Axis Bank. Similarly, some people will use HDFC credit cards, some people will use ICICI credit cards, some people will use Citibank credit cards. Similarly, in the USA, people will use my bank credit cards also. There are several banks in the USA like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, like that. There are so many banks out there. So my bank also providing credit cards for the people who are staying in the USA. Right. Whenever that person's apply in the USA, credit card application system is very fast, sir. Immediately. Actually, in the India, what will happen? In the India, we have to submit the form. After 3-4 days, credit card will come to our home. But in the USA, it is not like that. Whenever you go for a shopping, suppose your debit card doesn't have your money, then immediately you can apply for a credit card. So then and there itself, the shop person itself will give you the credit card. So that much fast the systems are going to work for the USA. My bank is also having such kind of system. Now, whenever you comes to this application for checking your credit card eligibility, you will provide some details in the UI. Those UI details will come to my microservice based application. Several microservices are going to process your request for different checks. Like generally CIBIL scores we are going to check for the credit card. Similarly, in the USA, there are several scores will be available for the USA citizen like this. One of the scores is called as FICO 100. That is very important for the getting credit card eligibility. Right, FICO 100. Similarly, FPD scores will be available. Similarly, UQFAX scores will be available. Similarly, what is that? SSA scores will be available. Like that. There are several scores that we are going to check, right? Whether that person taking any loan, did he pay the loan on the proper time or not? What is his SSN data? What is his income? How much tax he is paying? So many details we are going to check. Now, in this system, all the microservices are going to talk to the database for some data. For storing some data, for some retrieving some data, these microservices are going to talk to the database. Now, here, credit card should be provided immediately. There is no time for us. Credit card should be provided immediately. That means immediately we need to decide. Within a fraction of seconds of time, we need to decide whether that person is eligible for the credit card or not. Now tell me, for my requirement, maintenance is important or performance is important? In my project, maintenance is important or performance is important? Come on, sir. I need answers. Performance is important for me than the maintenance, because this credit card system should respond within fraction of seconds. Right? I am not going to change the database. My database changing, that forget about it. But performance is important for me. Every millisecond is also very important for our application. As it is a banking application, every millisecond is very important for our application. When I am considering a millisecond also, should I go for HQL or should I go for SQL? Should I go for HQL or should I go for SQL? I should go for SQL only. Why? Because HQL queries requires the extra step to convert to the SQL that may take 1 millisecond. That millisecond also very important. Now think about it. One HQL query is translating to SQL within 1 millisecond of time. In this processing, I am executing 100 SQL queries. I am executing 100 SQL queries. 100 SQL queries should be converted to 100 SQL queries. Every HQL taking 1 millisecond. 100 into 1, 100 milliseconds of time it is wasting. So the 100 milliseconds of time is very crucial for me. So the 100 milliseconds of time is very crucial for me. 1000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second, right? But for me, 100 milliseconds also very important. Then I should go for SQL query only instead of the HQL query. Are you able to follow this? Suppose today people will apply for the credit card. Tomorrow I need to tell them the eligibility. Then that much performance I don't consider. Then maintenance is important for me. Instead of writing the database dependent queries, I will go for database independent query. But in this situation, performance is more important for my scenario. So that's why sometimes whenever performance is more crucial for our project, instead of the HQL queries, we will write the SQL queries in the project. Are you able to follow this? So both SQL and HQL having advantages, having disadvantages also. When you go for SQL, what is the advantage? Performance wise fast. What is the disadvantage? Data is dependent. When you go for HQL, maintenance wise they are recommended, but performance wise they are not recommended. So now answer my question, which one is recommended? SQL query is recommended or HQL query is recommended? Earlier people told that HQL. Now give me the answer. It depends. That is the right answer. It depends on the situation. It depends on the situation. If you go for HQL, performance will be down, but maintenance wise they are recommended. When you go for SQL, they are database dependent. Performance wise faster, but maintenance wise they are not recommended. Are you able to understand this? The difference between SQL query and HQL, and when to go for SQL and when to go for HQL? Clear. Very good. So with this we understood what is custom query in the data JPA. What is custom query in the data JPA? What is custom query in the data JPA? We will tell to the data JPA which query it has to execute. We will tell to the data JPA which query it has to execute. To work with custom queries in the data JPA, programmer will write that query. Programmer will give that query to the data JPA to execute. Sir, do I need to give the only query or do I need to give the implementation for the method also? You need to give only query. That is sufficient. You no need to give the implementation for the method. You don't need to give implementation for the method. You just provide the query. That's it. How to provide a query? By using at query annotation. By using at query annotation, we can provide that. Right. When we are working with custom queries, recommended to use which queries? HQL queries or SQL queries. Now, with this concept, we need to understand which query is recommended. Right? So it depends on situation. So generally, people will prefer to go for HQL when the performance is least importance for them. Right? HQL queries are DB dependent. HQL queries are DB dependent, whereas SQL queries are DB dependent. What is HQL? HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. When somebody talks about the HQL, definitely they need to talk about the dialect also. If you don't explain about the dialect, then interviewer will not satisfy. When they ask you a question about the HQL, don't stop your explanation with the HQL. You have to continue your explanation till dialect class, because dialect class is the one which is playing the major role when we are working with the HQL queries. So how many dialect classes are there in the ORM like Hibernate? 30 dialect classes are there. That means if you write a HQL query without changing anything, that can be executed in the 30 different databases. Right. Now, SQL queries are DB dependent, HQL queries are DB independent. Right. We understood what is projection and what is selection. What is selection? Retrieving specific rows from the table is called selection. By using where class we can achieve that selection. What is projection? Retrieving specific columns from the table is called as, specific columns data from the table is called as projection. Can a query contain both projection and selection? Can a query contain both projection and selection? Come on. Can a query contain both projection and selection? Yes, a query can contain both projection and selection also. Right now, next, write it. HQL is better or SQL is better? HQL is better or SQL is better? HQL is better or SQL is better? It depends on the situation. It depends on the business scenario. As I told you, as part of my application business scenario, performance is very important for us. That's why we will use SQL queries. As part of your project, if maintenance is important for you, then HQL query is better. Right. HQL queries will take more time to execute than SQL. HQL queries will take more time to execute than SQL because HQL queries should be HQL queries will take more time to execute than SQL queries because HQL queries should be converted to SQL queries. HQL queries should be converted to SQL queries. SQL queries should be converted to SQL queries. Right. SQL queries are recommended. SQL queries are recommended. SQL queries are recommended performance-wise. SQL queries are recommended performance-wise. Maintenance-wise, HQL queries are recommended. HQL queries are recommended. So HQL is better or SQL is better. That depends on your business scenario, which operation you are doing. Whether maintenance is important for your operation or performance is important for operation. Based on that, we will choose either HQL query or we will choose SQL query. All of you clear with the theoretical part? Right. Now, let us try to develop one application by using this custom query. Let us try to develop one application by using this custom query so that we understand how to build that application. Right. So in the existing project only, I will add that custom query method. Now, custom query that I want to do is to retrieve particular name based on particular ID. Same project, go to repository. Right. Now, let me write one method which will use a custom query. Now I want to retrieve all the contact names for all the records. That is my requirement. Public list of string. All the contact names means more than one contact name. So to represent more than one contact name, we will use list of strings. Public list of string. Find all contact name. Find all contact names. Right. So what is the query that I need to execute? Can you tell me how can I retrieve all the contact names? Can you tell me how can I retrieve all contact names? Right. I need to specify the query here. If you observe the attributes of this query, there is a concept called value. There is a concept called a native query. Native query nothing but SQL query. So data JPA will support for both the HQL queries as well as the native SQL queries also. It depends on the situation. Either you need to go for a HQL query or we need to go for SQL query. Right. It supports for both. HQL queries we can execute as well as SQL queries also we can execute by using data JPA repositories. Right. Now I will write a query. First, can you tell me SQL query for my requirement? Can you tell me SQL query for my requirement? So requirement retrieve all contact names. Retrieve contact names for all records. Retrieve contact name for all record of all records. Retrieve contact name of all records. Can you tell me how can I do that? First, I want you to write SQL, then we can convert into HQL. Come on. Respond. Select contact name from the table name. That's it. Right? So select contact underscore name from contacts underscore master. Select contact name from contacts master. This is SQL. Now tell me HQL query for this. Can you tell me HQL query for this? HQL query for this. Select contact name from contacts master entity. Select contact name from contacts master entity. That is the corresponding HQL query. Now, for the Spring data, I will tell you execute this query. I will tell to Spring data, you don't apply your brain. If I give find by method, Spring data has to apply its brain to find the query which it has to execute. But when I go for a custom query, it no need to apply its brain. Just whatever query I am giving, it has to execute that query. 1 second, sir. This is hanging. Right. I'm writing that custom query in the repository method by using @query annotation. Why I am taking list of string? Why I am not taking as a direct string as a return type? Can anybody answer that? Why I am taking list of string? Why I am not taking string directly? I need your response. I need your response. I don't have any where class. So there is a chance of getting more than one record. So how to hold more than one record? For that I am going for collection. That is called list of string. Right. Let's save it. You understand, right, why I am taking collection? Good. Now select contact name from contacts master entity. Perfect. Now let us test it. Are we able to execute this query or not? Let us test it. Are we able to execute this query or not? Go to our boot start class. This is my Spring Boot start class. Call our custom query method. Comment it. Bean dot find all contact names. Bean dot find all contact names. What is the return type of this one? List of names. It is going to return list of names. Store into a variable name. Storing into a variable called names. Now we right names dot for each I'm using for each method introduced in Java 8. Names dot for each name with lambda expression. System dot out dot println of the name. System dot out dot println of that. So today my system is very slow. System dot out dot println of that particular name. Perfect. Let us run this application and see. Right click, run app, boot app. Go to the console. Application is getting started. Still our application is getting started. Right. You see here, this is the query that got executed. Select contact name from contact master. So you see, is this HQL query or is this SQL query? Come on, is this HQL query or this is SQL query? Rushi, please verify. Is this HQL query or is it SQL query? It is SQL query. But what we have written in our program? We have written HQL. But finally that is executing as SQL. That means what happened? HQL is converted to SQL. Who has done that conversion? Dialect class has done that conversion. So what is the proof for that? So what is the proof for that? See here, whenever you start up, whenever we start our application, here it is using one dialect. See this org.hibernate.dialect. Which dialect it is using? It is going to use Oracle 10G dialect. As I am using Oracle database, it is using Oracle 10G dialect. If you use MySQL database, then MySQL dialect will be used. If you use DBT, DB2 dialect will be used. So based on the database, it will choose the dialect. Based on the dialect, it is going to convert HQL queries to SQL query. Now, there are 3 records available in the database. For those 3 records, we are able to retrieve the names. Only names we retrieved. How we retrieved only names? By applying projection in the HQL query, we are able to retrieve the names. Right. By applying the projection, we are able to retrieve the names of the records. All right. Now, so in order to write this custom query, we are going to follow this procedure. Let me add this to notes. So like this, we are writing a custom query. Now let me upload these notes to our shared folder. Yesterday's one and today's one, both I uploaded to shared folder. Right guys, in the location, let me ping the location. Yes sir, I corrected that sir. Today I uploaded the correct notes for that. I uploaded the correct file now. So tomorrow we'll talk about that query translator and I will talk about the named position parameters. Right.